Guys, I've been making Apple content for over a decade, and I think this might be the most important day in Apple history in all that time. Let's talk about it.
Welcome to All Future, where we talk all things AI, tech, and Apple throughout the week. And two of those are our topic today because Apple just held WWDC, their presentation to start WWDC at least. And they talked everything iOS, which we'll get to in another video, as well as artificial intelligence and machine learning. And it's official. It is called Apple Intelligence, what they're launching here. Basically, they talked about powerful capabilities, and from the start, they talked about it being powerful, intuitive, integrated, personal, and private. And in a very Apple fashion, they went all in on the private.
Yes. First of all, I would like to apologize to all of our viewers. And all these times we've been talking about Apple and AI, we never thought to call it Apple Intelligence.
I know.
The most obvious thing to call it. This is a utter failure of creativity on our part.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if we had generative AI stuff right in our scripts, like Apple showed off today, we would have thought about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Apple Intelligence is going to be kind of their marketing term for it. Pretty solid, I think. A good way to differentiate them from their competitors or just the general AI kind of name.
Theirs is artificial. Ours is Apple.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's actually. I mean, it's kind of a joke, but you can almost argue that's their thesis. A lot of all this stuff is that the two things I think they kept hitting over and over: personal, private. Right? Like they kept saying that over and over and over, which are two of the things that kind of the negative attacks people have had about AI. So I think this was really smart on Apple. The things that they laid out that you laid out in the beginning, like they're kind of on their slide, kind of their points that they were going to follow. The powerful, intuitive, integrated, personal, private. Mm-hmm. The PIP, I guess if you're gonna like try to pronounce that as an acronym.
PIP.
The PIP. This is, I think. Look, I'm just my headline up front on this, and I don't know if you came away with this same reaction, but I would say not only did this hit every single thing we thought they needed to talk about over the past 3 months of us talking about this, but they showed it working really well, a really slick interfaces, nice integration of it all. So in my opinion, I think they knocked this out the park. I think they nailed this. Am I way off base here? Where are you at on this?
Well, I'll just be the devil's advocate and say, it's a pre-recorded presentation, so all of their examples, when they're using Siri and doing natural language, they had multiple attempts for it to perform well, and they have the good version of that. But yeah, the integration all looks like exactly what we've wanted, and it seems to be working very well, especially at the beginning. And I think they were pretty clear that these are beta features to a degree and going to be getting better. So they talked about a lot of these coming with iOS 18 and then a lot of them coming throughout the year. And so I don't know, they just kind of set expectations, I think, pretty well of, hey, look at how cool these things are. And then also they're going to be getting better in time.
Definitely. And so just some of the details about it if you guys didn't watch the presentation, which was another kind of unique thing about this is that they kind of split talking about the OS and talking about AI or Apple Intelligence, into these two separate sections. So they covered a lot in it. So just off the top, they talked about it prioritizes on-device AI over sending it to the cloud, which is something we've talked about a lot. That's probably the way Apple's going to go. And then when they talked about the reasoning for that, privacy. And then they also had a pretty slick kind of explanation for how things will stay secure on the cloud side when it does have to reach out to servers to figure out what's going on. I forgot what their exact marketing phrase was. It's something like private compute or something.
Yeah, private cloud compute.
Private cloud compute. There you go. And they talked about how there's going to be third-party auditors to make sure that they can look at so outside entities can look at the code to make sure things are private, and that your information and data that you send there is only going to be used for that request, not going to some kind of bank to train things or for marketing purposes for anything else that you obviously need to worry about if you're using some of these other services. Gemini, things like that, right?
Yeah.
So I think they explained that really well. I think they did a good job of, at the top, kind of giving people that warm, fuzzy feeling about it a little. just calling it Apple Intelligence instead of AI, stressing how private it's going to be, stressing that they're going to default to on-device stuff, and when it does have to go to the cloud, they're like, hey, you can trust us on this, guys. And I will say, I mean, obviously Apple's had some data leaks, different. I mean, they're not, no company can be perfect dealing with this amount of data, but Apple does have a history of kind of putting their money where their mouth is on these things. What, like famously, there was a, literally, I won't say the words in case Apple or YouTube flags it, but there have been extreme violent attacks places, and this FBI will come to Apple with suspects iPhones, and Apple will go, well, we're not going to unlock that. Right? If a phone is encrypted, Apple doesn't really have the ability to fully unlock it even, So Apple's shown that they can be, as much as a tech company can be trusted with their data, be trusted with it. So I like that they stressed this off the top. This felt really good to me. And then after that, they kind of hit like, and here's all the stuff it's going to do. And that's when it got really cool.
Yeah. So we saw kind of a breakdown of a bunch of text features we expected, a bunch of Siri features, a bunch of photo features, which we have mixed feelings about. And then ultimately, the main thing is that it understands personal context and it can understand multiple layers of things and take action. It can retrieve stuff from your phone, understand what is happening on screen at a given moment. And that's why this privacy stuff is so important, is because it's actually understanding what you're doing, which is great. But if that's sending to a random server that you don't trust, you don't want that to happen. So yeah, let's get into the individual things.
So they started by saying, hey guys, we know everyone complains about Siri, but guess what? All you suckers are using it all the time.
Yeah, 1.5 billion requests a day.
Exactly. So you guys might be angry with it, but you're definitely using it. And then they basically laid out what we've been calling Siri Pro. Like, obviously Apple wasn't really going to call it that. They just are going to call it Siri, and it's just the new version of Siri powered by these large language models. And some just aesthetic changes to it, had a new look, which I really liked. I like this kind of glowing edge animation that it does on the screen. And I think it's actually not just a better looking way to do it, but kind of intuitively tells you what Siri is doing now.
Yeah.
Which before it felt like a pop-up separate app, which is kind of what it was, right? So it had the little pop-up, glowing orb thing. And now it's showing like, hey, you basically have just used AI to access your phone. So your phone is turned into AI mode all of a sudden. So it's a nice visual cue to show what Siri's doing now and its new capabilities. It's the natural language thing is, I mean, that was, if they had just announced this, I'd be like, oh, praise the gods, right? Like this is what we've complained about so many times. The ability for it to comprehend natural language, for it to comprehend kind of the stutter stop ways. Sometimes you have to talk to Siri because you don't know what you're asking at first. To ask follow-ups, to give it corrections. They did all that in the demo. So that was really great. Type to Siri. Which I thought was very cool. Is this something you think you're going to like use a lot?
Totally, yeah. I think there's going to be times when it's just you don't want to talk to Siri, which I think is kind of a lot of the time for a lot of people. You're in a context where maybe it could do something for you, but you just don't want to talk to it, so then you just do it yourself. Yeah, type in your request and do so in natural language, and it should be able to understand it. So you just quickly jot down what you're trying to accomplish, and it does it for you. I think that's pretty nice. They did an example, just set a 7 a.m. alarm. That's not that complex, but instead of, opening up the clock app, adding an alarm, going 7 a.m., you just type in 7 a.m. alarm and bam.
I'm slightly going to hijack us going down this list, because when I saw this, the first thing that came to my mind was, these are the first steps to the post-app world. And what I mean by that is there's still going to be apps, but we're not going to interface with them the way we do now.
Yeah.
In much the same way that apps have erased people knowing about things like file structure or saving documents, all these kind of what are now antiquated ways to think about computing. This post AI kind of, after AI, post apps kind of situation, it's like, why do I need to open anything anymore? Almost it's almost like if you need to open an app, that's the exception, not the rule. Because if you look at the example for the alarm, that's pretty simple, right? But add to that what they're calling app intents, which is this idea that you can give an app multiple instructions through the Siri or the Apple Intelligence interface, and it can execute on there. It's like, oh, well, this is pretty cool. Like, why? I don't need to learn how to do anything anymore or open anything. Really, it's just like, hey, do this, this, this. smart Apple intelligence, and then it goes for it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's when I don't think I was being hyperbolic at the top of the video when I said I think this is a massive sea change in how people are going to interact with their devices. And I know, like we've talked about on this podcast, what other companies have done, but Apple fully baking this into iOS, iPad OS to a lesser extent, Mac OS to a lesser extent. This is going to change how people interact with their world and how we interact with our phones, I think.
Absolutely. One of the examples they gave kind of in that regard was in photos. They just said, make this photo pop. So that's super natural language. You don't even have to think, what is that feature? What is that little wand?
Exactly, right? It's taking away all the skill level barrier to entry for these things, right? I don't need to know exposure, vibrance, saturation, contrast, black point. Like there's all these things that are in photo editing that if you don't edit photos a lot, you don't really even know what they mean. If you can just tell it, hey, make that pop, and then give it follow-on stuff, like, not that much. And it, it understands that kind of context.
Which was another piece we didn't fully mention, conversational context within Siri.
Exactly, right? So, like this is going to let people interact with their digital world and in turn interact with the real world in such a natural way that we have never been able to do before. And I'm excited about it. I think this is super cool. And like I said, I think Apple nailed a lot of these features.
Yeah.
Like this I can't think of one thing we've talked about over the last couple months that we wanted to see that they didn't bring up today.
Yeah, most of it was there. We were watching the event just kind of constantly going, oh, yep, we thought they might do that. Oh, yep, that was the rumor. Yeah. But aside from Siri, which I would actually argue, I think Siri is the biggest part of the whole thing. And long term is going to be the biggest part because it can take action on things. But aside from that, there's a lot of other stuff. So they showed off writing tools, smart replies, email summaries instead of just the first line. So when you're actually looking at all of your emails, it gives you a little summary there. That seems really useful to me.
Incredibly useful.
Yeah, as opposed to just the first line. I wasn't totally sure on email summaries. Like, do I want an AI summarizing this email? But in that context, it gives you a quick glance at what is actually in the email. I think that's really useful. Summarize group chats. We talked about that for our own group chat.
Yeah.
It'll give you the important info you need and surface the important text of the info that's buried by a bunch of jokes about Apple memes or something.
Sure,
Then the next one was Genmoji, which we also talked about. Generate an emoji and make a sticker, a react, or an inline message emoji. So they're not official emojis, but you can generate it based on a text prompt, and that seems pretty cool.
Yeah, which is, I guess, goes to the larger part about the entire image generation, generative diffusion model kind of images that they showed off. And they showed it in a lot of different apps, basically. And this is going to be available to developers. So I imagine every single creation app in existence is going to have generative image AI built into it. It looked to my eye that they were using some kind of DALL-E model, like based on kind of how it looked. I just see a lot of generative AI images. So that I think that's what they're using instead of say Midjourney or something more photorealistic. It still had that kind of cartoon element look, even when you use the illustrative mode and all these kind of things. So that's probably the model they're using. But it's going to change how people make things entirely, right? Like if you look at things that I thought were incredibly helpful, that people, we're going to start seeing them all the time, right? Keynotes using generative AI for presentations, instead of having to go and find an example of that image, just having it make the thing for you. The Notes app, where taking that kind of terrible sketch of the architectural feature, which it appeared to be like their demo was from an architectural class, so I question the person in an architect class who can't draw, but I don't know, whatever. So maybe I guess you don't need to anymore. The AI can do it all for you. So so I thought that was cool. The kind of the AI magic wand or image wand. What do they call it?
They called it image wand.
Image wand, which is. It seems like it's something that's going to be able to just be built into everything, where any kind of image you can just be like, hey, like here's my bad sketch of this, improve this.
Yeah, and it takes context from the text around it as well.
It's every single thing we want. Like every part where I thought they were like, oh, this is not going to be as cool as we think it's going to be, right? Because it'll do the image generation, but you need to sit there and put in the prompts or something like that, which would still be cool. Like I'm not against that, but this is like, oh, you don't even need to do that. It's just taking all that away from you. And if you look at some of the other image generation stuff they were showing, it's like you don't have to do prompts at all, even make custom stuff. It kind of suggested, it had the example of like you're sending something to your friend or whatever, and it was kind of a joke kind of thing. And it's like, oh, we can make a cartoon version of you, your friend, at a sunset because that's what you guys are talking about. And you don't even need to actually prompt it. It'll just be like, yes, these elements, go for it. And then it just does it. Which again, like the context awareness and the kind of the situational awareness of it all is, I think, the most impressive thing to me. It knows what's going on. And Apple, they mentioned this in the thing, because of how they end to end to make the software, the hardware, all the core apps that people are using, you can have this kind of integration, right? It's a much deeper integration, I think, than we've seen through Copilot or Gemini, where it seems like it's kind of, it's helping you within this app. Like it can kind of do some other stuff outside of that. But this is a much more holistic, I think, view of these type of things, which I think is going to be Apple's secret weapon here. We've talked about a lot. Like, what's Apple going to give us that looks different, that's cooler, that could sell phones? And then being able to say, hey, our whole thing is going to be way smarter and better now. And you're not even going to have to think about it. You don't need to know anything about AI. You don't need to know anything about prompts. You don't know anything about writing, whatever. It's just going to be there for you.
Yeah, and you use natural language. So even if you mess up when you're describing it or you have to iterate, you can do it all like you would be talking to a human. I do think they probably very purposely made all of the image generation stuff stylized. Like I think it was sketch, cartoon, and another.
Yep. There was no photorealist option.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Which I don't think Apple wants to even get into.
Yeah, especially not in Gen 1 when they're trying to say, hey, this is coming to all of your phones. Kind of whether what you want it or not, it's going to be there as an option. If they had that creepy thing thing that's creepy for a lot of people, then that wouldn't be the best. But they are doing stuff with actual photos. So they're bringing stuff that we've kind of seen through Gemini and Google Photos especially, which is photo editing and the cleanup tool, which is just a very quick thing that cleans up the background, gets rid of the other people you don't want in the background of your family photo. And then also more advanced search stuff within photos. So you can search, like, for instance, they gave an example, Katie with stickers on her face. So just being very specific in photos, which I think is extremely useful, because right now when you search for a photo, you know the photo, but you're like, when was it from? I don't know.
Yeah, and the kind of context search it has now is not nearly as advanced as this. Like if you would have typed stickers on face into that content, you would get nothing. Like it would return nothing on it. So I like that a lot. Just again, and that taking away all the boring task of computing. That's almost been Apple's goal since the beginning, right? Since 1977, that's what they've been trying to do. And this gets us super close. Like, oh, don't worry about organizing your photos. We do it all for you, right? Like, don't worry about how to make this look better. We'll do this. We'll do it for you. Don't worry about having to sort your email. We'll do that for you. It's like it's taking away the mundane kind of task you have to do as you're computing or using these digital devices. And I love that. I love it.
Definitely. One of the really interesting things was improvements to the memory feature in Photos, where it already will do this. It will make a memory like video. But in this case, you prompt it for a specific thing, and you can be very specific, and it will track down the photos and make a memory video for you, which just seems like a huge improvement over that. And that's one of those things that at first glance, as someone who's like a video editor, it's like, oh, what? But
I thought it's good, and they kind of breezed over this a little bit. They talked about it'll make a narrative arc.
Yeah.
And so the kind of narrative arc is like, oh, here's a little kid learning to fish. Oh, they get better at fishing. Oh, they caught a fish, right? It understood like how to make a story out of the photos, which, that's very cool. But RIP, all our editing jobs we have. But,
from that context, but then when you're just, you just want to make a quick thing of your family. That's
it's not like anyone's going to hire a professional editor to do this stuff.
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
that's why I say a lot of these things, you can make the same argument about the image editing and stuff like that. Oh, it's going to put graphic designers out of work, which, yes, that's happening. That's already happening. Apple's not going to stop, prevent, or do anything about that, right? It's just a matter of having it built in. And I think it works for that more personal level, right? Like someone using Keynote to make like a graduation memory slideshow to play at the graduation party isn't hiring graphic designers anyway, right?
Yeah.
So this lets them make something cooler and nicer, so we don't have to sit through something terrible. My same thoughts. We kind of bounced over it, but all the generative writing stuff in it.
Oh yeah.
Same kind of thing where it's like, oh, like it's going to make me not have to sit through poorly written email. So I'm all for it, right? And and I thought it was cool, like it was slick, kind of how they integrated some of the stuff, because it was like, oh, we can just write this whole thing for you, or highlight it and say like, oh, I want this tone to be playful. Oh, I want this to be professional, and then it kind of changes it, and then lets you see the justifications for its changes.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool too. It's like, because you can look at it and go, oh, why is this more professional? And you can ask it and go, well, yes, in professional things, you don't use weird Gen Z slang or something, whatever it is. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So I love that. And yeah, it's having this. Well, we've talked about this. Apple can't control the tide, right? Like, and that's what's happening here. This generative writing stuff is going to be built into everything. If Apple didn't do it, no one would use Pages anymore. And I know that my sister works in education. She talks about AI a lot, and basically that like it's just game over for like things like written book reports and stuff like that, right? Like it's not going to matter anymore because everyone is going to be using these tools, right? So you need to just think about, if we're going to, I won't use education example. Let's use like an example of like hiring someone, and you get this really great cover letter, this really great resume, but all of them are going to look like that. So really, the deciding factor is going to be more human interaction, right? It's going to be when you actually do the interview, or in education, it's going to be the oral presentation on it instead of just the writing. So I think in a way, these tools are going to make our human connections better and make people better at articulating themselves and explaining their point of view, because now it's taken away something that was a struggle for some people. It's hard for some people to formalize their thoughts in writing, even though they have great thoughts, right? And maybe they would be great in person, but it just can't get across in the writing. Same thing with all the image generation stuff. Like maybe I've got a great idea for my slideshow graphic and I have no idea how to do it, right? Like, so it's these tools, I think, as much as there's going to be adjustment to how we use them, and there's negative sides maybe, I'm excited because this is putting incredibly powerful things, sci-fi level stuff that we thought, if you asked us 5 years ago, we would have said this stuff is 20, 30 years away. And this explosion in LLMs, generative AI, has just changed. It's changed how people are going to interact with each other. And it's cool. It's cool.
Absolutely. I definitely see all of that. And then I also see the context of like, yeah, writing is challenging. And if you have these tools, like especially at a younger age, you never actually have to face the challenge and you don't have to actually learn. And then do we create a world where no one's actually writing?
Yeah. Who knows, right? But at the same time, I've always been kind of one of those like smart skater people, like just skate by is what I mean by that. Like writing always came really natural to me. I have a great memory. Public speaking always came naturally to me. So like school has been a breeze for me. I've never struggled in school. I was salutatorian in my high school, honors grad from all 3 of my degrees in college.
All right.
And just showing off a little for you guys. But no, I'm saying that's bad. I'm saying it's bad because my just natural predisposition is to be good at things that school happens to look for. And I don't think I'm actually that smart. I think I'm really good at articulating ideas and sounding smart, which is what school is, and what jobs are even too. Like, so I think it's good. This levels the playing field for people and just makes it so where, your ideas are what's matter, not if you can just happen to execute that idea better.
Yeah. That's definitely, we should do a longer discussion on that because I'm curious. But we haven't even talked about Chat GPT yet, which Apple did partner with. It's their first one, and it very much looks like they're partnering, but they were pretty clear that it's like, this is one of our partnerships going forward. So they're integrating Chat GPT through Chat GPT 4.0. It's built into Siri, and it's the kind of thing where Siri, if it can't handle a request, I think is the way it's going to work. It will say, do you want to send this to ChatGPT? And you click yes, which is a built-in buffer right there that I think a lot of people will appreciate, because then they can click no if they're like, I don't want to be associated with that at all. And it is free without an account. You don't have to sign up for ChatGPT, and it's free, which is a pretty big deal.
Yes. I love this integration too. We've talked about this. Is Apple going to, because the first rumor was, oh, they're going to use Gemini, and then they started talking about OpenAI. And now this kind of shows that, well, all of it was kind of true, and that they're going to just allow people to use different models if they want to use different models, and having Siri be smart enough what model to kind of bounce that out to, and letting the user decide if they want to do that, right? If you don't want your stuff going to GPT servers or Gemini servers or Copilot or Llama or whatever they integrate in the future, then you can say, oh, no, that's not for me. But it's Apple gets to have their cake and eat it too here, because they can say, hey, we still have all of these capabilities, and you can decide to use them or not, right? Instead of us just force feeding it kind of into you, because we've kind of talked about that, like, oh, if they're going to go with OpenAI models, is that just going to happen in the background, and we're not even going to know what's happening and all this kind of stuff? But this is it's putting it up front for the user to decide. I love that, and it also is going to encourage good competition in the LLM space.
Yeah.
Because if you let people decide what they want to use, you can go, oh, this actually works better here. This works better with this model. So I think that was a really clever implementation of it, and smart. So I love that.
Yeah. It seemed like you can also use your paid features as well, I believe, if you have a Chat GPT account, and you can integrate that.
Right, which at this point I'm like, oh, it's going to just have your chat history, right? Like, what feature is not going to be there?
Or is there a token limit still? I wonder.
They didn't say anything like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Apple just backed up the money truck to them and said, hey, can iPhone users always use Chat GPT? Because that would be a bad user experience if Siri goes, I don't know, can I send it to Chat GPT? You send it to Chat GPT, and you get that answer. It's like, you've hit your limit. Come back in 2 hours to get this answer.
Apple would immediately shut that
down.
down.
They're like, oh, this isn't good at all, right? So yeah, like, and I imagine this is why when they announced 4.0, they basically have just let everyone start using it for free, and the Mac app and everything. You can use it without accounts now, and really, the paid account and having an account is really, it's just giving you that access to your old chat logs and stuff, right? Like, I'm not seeing any huge benefit to being a paid member for most people. Like, I think I'll probably stay a paid member. Just I've been using it. Let me just see how it all lands, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe it'll have a better benefit. But yeah, it just a lot of big stuff. I'm pretty excited about it. What's your read on this? What's your favorite thing that they talked about here? Or what's the most impactful? I don't know. Like, what's your big takeaway?
I'm
here?
most excited for the natural Siri stuff, and also being able to type requests, because I want to use Siri, but I don't use it as much as I would like to right now, just because it's difficult sometimes and doesn't get the job done. And then you're just like, oh, I just wasted 10 seconds or whatever. But yeah, I'm most excited for the natural language stuff, and it being able to take actions across the phone, and being able to just, the alarm example is a good one, because just picture that to the nth degree in whatever app you want, and it should be able to do that for you.
Well, you can tell it even things like, wake me up 30 minutes before this TV show comes on so I don't miss it or whatever. You know, like having all that context awareness in it. Wake me up 30 minutes before I need to leave so I'm not late for that meeting.
Yeah.
Like, having all that context in it.
And it will actually look at traffic. It'll look at the appointment time.
Yeah, their demo of like the meeting your mom for lunch thing, right? Like picking her up from the airport and going to lunch. Like, that's exactly kind of the examples we've been talking about. I loved it. I think this is going to make people's lives easier and better. And I think once people, kind of the civilian people, not the people listening to this kind of podcast, right? But like, once my mom starts seeing how cool this is, she's going to be showing all our friends and be like, guys, you got to get on this. This is awesome, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to get people excited for new phones, new devices. They did mention, like, basically you need an M1 chip or a 17, I think is what they said. So there's gonna be a hard tech cutoff there. So yeah, I think it's gonna encourage people to upgrade, and I suspect that we're just seeing the beginning of this.
Definitely.
Because like all WWDC it's really more, hey, here's the cool things that get you excited, so you watch our iPhone event, and then we show you the real stuff. So I imagine they're gonna roll out even more impressive stuff, and some impressive features that are gonna be like, and now with Apple Intelligence, only on the new iPhone 16 Pro, you can do blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And we were joking because there's all the times in the presentation they're making announcements about APIs. And we're like, ugh, boring. But that's actually what this event is for.
Right.
And so that's kind of arguably the bigger deal, is that they're releasing APIs for all these different things so that third parties can implement these things into their apps. So yeah, it's just going to be a lot of improvements, a lot of stuff. Coming later this year is kind of the timeline right now. We don't have an actual release date for iOS 18, but Apple Intelligence is coming. with iOS 18, which encompasses iPad OS 18 and Mac OS Sequoia.
Yeah.
Yes. They weirdly left out Vision OS, which I don't quite understand.
No Apple Intelligence for Vision OS. I think it was just easier to say. Like,
Yeah.
I think just dropped out because
Instead
there's too
of
many things
listing
to
more
list.
things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to see where all this goes. And Apple announced a lot that could be huge, especially in the years to come.
Super excited.